not always know what I want, but I do know what I don't want. Stanley Kubrick. He hailed himself as a visionary, a man of high esteem who was an honor to work with. This examination of himself was not a matter of conceit, but of fact. Stanley Kubrick left his mark on the world. His films Lolita and A Clockwork Orange shifted already evolving social attitudes in the 70s and 80s. The controversy surrounding his films caused conflict with conservative forces attempting to censor his work, and thus he was forced to compromise when he abided by social restrictions in order to make and distribute his films. The result of his agreement to partial censorship allowed his films to be released, which gave him directorial acclaim and open debates about social attitudes towards sex and violence that collide today, leaving a lasting legacy of Lolita culture and the ways in which media violence can influence a society. The Roaring Twenties produced a Hollywood that was out of control, as shown by the case of Fatty Arbuckle, a popular actor being accused of rape and murder and falling victim to salacious rumors. Hollywood became inundated with complaints of nudity, and in 1915, the Supreme Court ruled that films were not protected under the First Amendment. In order to improve Hollywood's image and prevent the government from censoring or banning films themselves, the Hays Code, a set of industry moral guidelines, was established in 1922 by the Motion Picture Association of America. Variety magazine published the code in 1930 with the don'ts and be carefuls in terms of censorship in movies. Some of these advised against brutal killings, excessive and lustful kissing, and more. 6 years after the enactment of the Hays Code, Stanley Kubrick was born on the 26th of July in 1928 in New York. Growing up, Stanley Kubrick was quiet and inquisitive. As a teenager, he took an interest in photography. At only 16, he sold a photograph to Look magazine and was later admitted to their staff. He taught himself all aspects of filmmaking. His first short film was a documentary called Day of the Fight in 1951 about the life of a middleweight Irish boxer named Walter Cartier. In order to support his directing career, his father cashed in his life insurance for Kubrick to make Fear and Desire. His next successive films, The Killer's Kiss and The Killing, received subpar reviews. It was not until the production of Paths of Glory that he became recognized as a talented filmmaker. After receiving acclaim and working on the popular film Spartacus, Kubrick finally had artistic and economic freedom to invest in a more risque project. He stated, "Now I can make a story I have a crush on." Nearing the end of the Hays Code in the 1960s, the Motion Picture Association of America began to allow movies to play which did not adhere to their strict rules. Moviegoers wanted to be wooed at the movies and did not usually take well to extreme censorship because of a new era which preached ideas of free sexuality. The Hays Code was abolished in 1962, the same year of the release of Kubrick's Lolita. However, even with the repealing of the Hays Code, Kubrick's sixth film would face much controversy and censorship, and in turn he had to compromise in order for it to be shown. The story of Lolita first appeared in Vladimir Nabokov's novel of the same name in 1955. It was highly acclaimed, yet wasn't praised without some critics, who found the premise of a grown man falling in love with his 12-year-old stepdaughter disturbing and vulgar. Kubrick was attracted to the story and began production in 1958. Working with Nabokov, he was able to acquire a script written by the original author. Kubrick's film was significantly different than the novel. Anticipating a possible negative reaction from the public, Kubrick compromised and changed the age of the main character, Lolita, from 12 to 15 or 16. He also changed the sequence of book events, and did away with any erotic fantasies Humbert played upon in the novel. When the film was finally released, it was advertised with the tagline, "How did they ever make a movie out of Lolita?" playing off of public outrage and conflictual excitement in order to attract more moviegoers. His movie was met with backlash and conflict from society. Critics described it as foul, perverse, and wanted it removed from theaters. The Catholic Legion of Decency was an organization known for condemning immoral films that displayed premarital sex, abortion, and divorce, and condemned Lolita and placed it on a list with other ungodly films. More so, controversy confronted Sue Lyon, who played Lolita. Before the filming of the movie, Kubrick had received peculiar letters from parents of auditioning young actresses, stating claims such as, "My daughter really is Lolita." This social apathy towards the character of Lolita, a young woman sexualized by a grown man, was forgotten at the movie's release. Even with the production code labeling Kubrick's film as rated X, it was still banned from several theaters. In order to sustain its life and profit, Kubrick and his filmmaking team re-released the 1962 film. They compromised the emphasis of the man's sexual fascination with Lolita by cutting short shots of Kubrick looking at a photograph of Lolita while being intimate with his wife. After Lolita somewhat overcame its criticism to gain approval among film critics, Kubrick's popularity grew. In 1964, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, was released as a comedy highlighting the hypocrisy and ridiculousness of war.
You can't fight in here, this is the war room!
Because of its release being during the height of the Cold War, some labeled it a dangerous piece of propaganda. In 1968, there came 2001: A Space Odyssey. Despite some initial skepticism over its experimental filming style, this movie proved to be a smashing success. It received an Academy Award for visual effects, as well as a National Catholic Award for man's creative encounter with imagination, a significant shift from Catholicism's primary conflictual pushback of Kubrick and his films. Kubrick did not keep this cherry-sweet appearance for long. In 1971, he directed A Clockwork Orange, based off of an Anthony Burgess novel of the same name. This piece of cinematic art would go on to surpass the popularity of the original book, as well as be his most controversial conflictual film yet. A Clockwork Orange is about a man who takes pleasure in torture, abuse, assault, and murder. The film was labeled as NC-17 or R by the MPAA in order to shield younger audiences from the violent and sexual premise. Shortly after the movie was released, the London public, where Kubrick resided, began to once again take issue with one of Kubrick's works. Though Kubrick was still solidified in public opinion as an acclaimed director, his tendency to provoke audiences with disturbing content that purposely conflicted with social morality was still remembered. This public conflict only escalated with media exploitation of copycat murders and assaults. Youths were detained wearing A Clockwork Orange costumes while yielding knives. Several disturbing assaults against women were given constant press in newspapers such as Liverpool Echo. An elderly man was beat to death by a group of boys who called themselves the same names as characters in the movie. Kubrick was directly blamed for these rampant crimes.
People were really getting very unpleasant and nasty, but he was actually receiving death threats from quite big organizations, and the police said, look, you really should take this very seriously.
His children, Vivian and Anya Kubrick, complained of harassment at school in the form of bullying, taunts, and threats from their peers. Kubrick became afraid to send his children to school, and eventually, in order to compromise with an unwavering public, he made use of his immense power in the film world and got Warner Brothers to remove the film from British cinemas. Despite further disapproval in America because of its sex and violence, it was more accepted. It became the highest-grossing US movie of all time, triumphing over 1962's My Fair Lady. No doubt, the cinematic success was due to an increased interest in sex and violence in America that came during the 70s and 80s, where recreational drug use and the free love movement encouraged narcotic experimentation and sexual expansion. Kubrick continued to make acclaimed films such as Barry Lyndon, 1975, The Shining, 1980, and Eyes Wide Shut, 1999. Yet none would have as significant an impact on American attitudes towards film artistry, crime, and sex than Lolita and A Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick passed away on March 7, 1999 from a heart attack. After his death, Warner Brothers was granted the rights to once again screen and distribute A Clockwork Orange. On March 17, 2000, the UK could legally view Kubrick's film. Lolita has inspired countless other stories surrounding the idea of nymphettes and child sexuality. Lolita continues to inspire controversy in the 21st century. The Lolita Effect by M. Gigi Durham demonstrates the ways in which Kubrick's character symbolizes the over-sexualization of girls. Kubrick's partial censorship of Lolita to appease the MPAA led to the popularization of the symbol of the iconic red heart sunglasses that lend the capability of seduction to young girls. A Clockwork Orange also continues to leave its mark on Western nations. Severe prudency has disappeared from films, shown through the publication of extremely graphic or disturbing films which were not met with as much conflict as A Clockwork Orange. The philosophical questions it asks, such as whether or not bad people can change, have prompted many debates and social examinations of the ways in which our 21st century culture could mirror the messages in the movie. Vincent LoBruto of the Movie Making magazine writes, "He was a film director who invented himself. Stanley Kubrick was an autodidact and a 20th century filmmaking pioneer."
Who Kubrick has influenced, basically you have to say everyone who's ever studied any movies. Wes Anderson, certainly visually, in terms of that mise-en-scène, in terms of everything being in its place. The Coen brothers are huge Kubrick fans.
Steven Spielberg called Kubrick the grand master of filmmaking and observed that he created more than just movies. He gave us complete environmental experiences that got more, not less, intense the more you watched his pictures. He copied no one, while all of us were scrambling to imitate him.